だけどそこからどうやって今の社会ができたんだ。
あなた方が何の良心の呵責もなく虫けらのようにひねりつぶした我が同胞全員に対して。
Recently, you've probably seen an odd question on here or other platforms from me: what is a human? It's something that's been floating through my head since the first cognizant watch of Psycho-Pass and Shogo Makishima's words musing of free will and its importance, countered by Akane's belief in a just society. The anime From the New World took a stab at this question just as it popped into my head once again, with a very unique look at the question: can we lose our humanity exactly because we try to maintain it? What lengths are too evil, what measures are too awful, and how much can you take away from a human and still have a human? While the anime overall is quite average, plagued by technical issues, so-so animation, and abysmal pacing, it presents an argument to this question in crystal clear terms, an argument I'll do my best to interpret here today. There's only one place to start, and that's at the beginning, what this society hopes people will never see. The year of From the New World is relative, placed only in relation to other events past our current day. But Saki and crew learn from the false minushiro, or the Tsubaka branch of the National Diet Library, seen here, that human history is much more complex than they could have imagined. Power, the name for the psychic abilities they yield, wasn't always the norm. When it was discovered, it was only 0.3% of the population, but after a world war stemming from this discovery and the advancement of power because of this, their world's population dropped to a mere 2% of its height. To these children, venturing out into the world for the first time and uncovering forbidden history, this is a shock. How could someone with power cause war? Their society is at peace, subject to some scary rumors amongst the children, sure, but without terror on the whole. As far as they know, no human could ever harm another, especially with power. But we witness flashbacks to brutal scenes where a single human can kill entire city blocks in no time at all. The rise of power led to the rise of absolutely inhumane scenes like this. So as a reaction, the rulers of this new post-war world looked to animals. They implanted the genes of wolves and bonobos into the human code, causing an aversion to harming one's own species, and the want to deal with social issues by sexual contact and free love. Even further, they were given the death of shame, a natural reaction that halts the body's functions if they kill another human, leading to their own painful death. It's so strong, even the image of a human dying is enough to trigger some level of near death. This is where we reach the first aspect of the question. Power led to immensely inhumane acts, the slaughter of innocent people on the street, the sanctioned killing of citizens by rulers, and even war about power. But their solution is, in technical terms, inhumane, even though it seeks to be. To solve the issues of humanity's worst aspects, they turned away from humans, choosing to implant positive aspects of lesser species into the fabric of what a human is. They changed the biological definition of a human. One or two alterations that we know of, but who's to say there aren't more or won't be more in the future? How many times can you add different DNA to a human and still consider it a human? Like Homo sapien and Neanderthal, when does a grand enough distinction grow? Or is the answer somewhere more abstract? In a way, they hard-coded ethics into humanity. They don't even think they can harm another human, that's how much so they did. In this regard, discarding physicality, you could say they've made humans more humane. If we define ourselves based on our thoughts and ideas, the aspects that let us achieve so much as we have, implementing those into humanity itself is quite human. And you can also take the route of consequence. Humans no longer slaughter each other in the streets, whether by power or via weapons. They no longer have the option, and that's quite humane, making this quite human. Or to let Makishima creep back in, is that the choice that matters and removing the ability to kill another is actually very against what makes a human human. With only a bit of the story, you can see how complex this question can grow. But this is ignoring the part of the population without power. After they made these adjustments, there was a problem. Now those with power were weaker than those without. They couldn't harm other humans, and power wasn't a defining aspect of human. Those with and without were still human. Thus, those with power couldn't fight back when challenged. Their solution to this, though, was to make power a requisite for humanity. The twist at the end of the anime, and one of the things it did very well, is the reveal that monster rats, these servants of humanity, have 23 chromosomes, a trait only of humans and olive trees, and as they say, you can't make this out of an olive tree. Without even considering their treatment of the monster rats yet, let's look at the base of the decision. This is one of the biggest leaps in the narrowing of what constitutes a human. By changing everyone who doesn't have power into monster rats, they definitively state those without power are no longer human. They change their form to the point that the new internal ethics of humanity, the death of shame, no longer recognizes these former humans. They're able to kill them with reckless abandon, often delighting in the act. To maintain humanity, the structure of society they saw fit, they cut out a large swath of the population for the betterment of a few that were, in quotes, more evolved. And not stopping there, they now use the former humans as slaves. The monster rats live in their own colonies, serving under their queens, the only ones of them with the ability to give birth, a decision made to keep them loyal and susceptible. They see an air of autonomy, but they can be wiped out entirely for the slightest offense. They war amongst themselves in events sanctioned by the human councils, who watch as they spill blood in battle. This decision is another one of technicality. With those who can create war removed from the population, once again they do maintain some amount of humanity, but this time for a much larger and much less humane cost. But speaking as a moment as an advocate for the devil, it does what it needs to do. They decided peace and power were crucial aspects of a human, and with that decided, those without those traits were no longer considered human, and thus were changed to not even appear to be. But if you stop considering them human already, do you consider that an inhumane action, or one which seeks to maintain what humans are? For better or worse, they evolved. Does the definition need to evolve as well? To the monster rats, particularly Squealer, a member of the robber fly colony who goes on to lead a bloody revolution against humanity, what matters is intelligence. The monster rats are reinventing old world technology, to some extent even humans no longer have. They have weapons and armor, they form a functioning democracy, and even make a factory that outpaces their bipedal enemies. Squealer's argument is that their intelligence is what defines a human, as he argues later in his trial, stating frankly that monster rats are in fact human. Not because they once were, but because of this definition of intelligence. Considering how Satoru comments on just how human they are to a scary degree, it's an argument that doesn't ring hollow, at least not to us, as the humans of this world laugh it off immediately. To a group that is very human in ways you could say define our current humanity, the monster rats, it's the humans, those in the story with power, who are losing their humanity, not the other way around. They're bloody tyrants who can wipe other species off the face of the earth in a way they consider justified. From people who are only excluded by the definition of humans by force, humans are missing the point of being human. And to me, that says a lot. But moving on, there's another issue posed by their genetic manipulation. The greatest fear of humans in this world are two things: ogres and karmic demons. Ogres are humans with power who've broken free from the inbuilt ethical code they consider necessary. They've either lost their mind, or subdued the death of shame within themselves and kill rampantly, able to take out entire towns uncontrolled. Karmic demons are those who haven't broken free from the death of shame, but bypass it subconsciously. All humans with power experience leakage of their power, which affects the world around them. These sacred barriers they're disallowed to cross force this energy outside of their living areas and into the wild, mutating the life there, but leaving humanity itself unharmed. But when some people grow too powerful, when they begin to overload this, they can mutate fellow humans to death just by existing, causing defects that would kill anyone and anything. Because it wasn't an act of choice, the death of shame doesn't activate in them, and most times they agree to take their own lives to avoid further damage. And why can these two fears run rampant when they appear? Well, specifically because of the death of shame. Humans have no way to fight other humans, even when they're being actively assaulted. That's in their definition. Karmic demons, and ogres particularly, are of a human form and thus can't be attacked. Unchecked by drastic means, they can wipe out entire towns and then some. The only solution to this is methods that, in the old world, would generally be considered heinous. For one ogre, named only K, that appeared long ago, humanity got lucky. The ogre stopped to ask a doctor for help for an illness, likely knowing that it couldn't be harmed. However, the medicine he gave it was actually poison crafted by someone else. The doctor, not knowing exactly what it was, and the nurse, not directly giving the shot, allowed them to bypass their restrictions and kill another human. A straight-up poisoning. Taking it further, in the climax of the series, as another ogre appears, Saki and company travel to the hell on earth that is Tokyo in their modern day to retrieve the Psycho Buster, a weapon which can defeat those with power. And what is the gloriously named Psycho Buster? Anthrax. Modified to die after a couple of years so that humanity can return after its use. Throw a vial of it in a fancy container at the ogre and kill it. Ogres are obviously performing inhumane actions, so then stopping them would have to be humane, at least in some way, so old world weapons of mass destruction and biological warfare have become keys to maintaining humanity because of their definitions and inbuilt ethics. What was once not human is now very human. And according to those inbuilt ethics we have to keep referencing, ogres and karmic demons are human because humans can't attack them. Saki questions whether the ogre at the end of the series, the child of two of their friends who escaped Kamasu 66 and one raised by the monster rat as a weapon, is actually an ogre. And it's a fair question because what do ogre and karmic demon really mean? They're just random labels that are applied in an attempt to write those who technically fit their definition of human out of the definition of human. They're not human anymore, they're a karmic demon, so it's okay. Once again, all they're doing is narrowing the definition, this time in a very vague and specific way. I think that's why Saki questions it, because the concept of it is clearly just a bypass. These people are the direct result of their rules, their definitions, and their forced evolution. They wouldn't be able to go on these massive killing sprees if it wasn't for the past mistakes of this new world that gave them such an opportunity. They're those who have simply evolved past the death of shame, just like humans once evolved into power. One of those is considered human and one isn't. Evolution, once a crucial defining factor of this new humanity, is no longer such a thing. I, like Saki, would question that too. The appearance of ogres leads to a reaction by humanity. They got lucky once, but they realized that based on their own rules, if something like this would happen again, they would probably be wiped out entirely. To maintain humanity, they have to find a solution to this problem, or humans cease to exist. They do a lot to accomplish this, and it's most of what the series explores in the main cast's schooling. First, the kids are sent to a school for those without power, and once they develop it, they are upgraded to the unified class, the school for those with power. Saki, a late bloomer for this, drew concern from her parents for this reason. And why would that be? I mean, why would they be worried about their daughter being a perfectly natural human growing at a different rate like humans just do? It's because the kids who don't develop powers are killed. If someone is left in the lower school for too long, they're eliminated. And this is only natural as those without power don't fit the definition of humans, so why would they have a problem with killing them? This is an authoritarian society, one which strictly controls its population. As an example, they have hyper-specific rules. The one Saki and crew break while venturing past the sacred barrier is the 10th of the Platinum Laws, which lie at the heart of the ethics rules, the law of evil words, and 4 treasures. If that sounds hyper-specific and odd, that's because it is. They need a mass of laws that can account for every and all situations, because they remove any and all who are perceived as threats. Those who break rules, even minor infractions like those of a simple game they play in class, are removed, killed. The risk of ogres is so high that even if it's a 1 in a million chance, they have to act on it. Ogres, by their vague definition, and that term itself, ogre, are considered inhuman, so they see preventing them as human, and so killing children in the service of this becomes human. And this isn't even mentioning the suggestion and hypnosis they all undergo. As the children are slowly picked out of the populace, they're removed from the minds of the other kids as well. Group 1, our story's lead, goes from 6 to 5 members after the 6th is removed and she's never thought of again, because they altered her out of the minds of everyone else. The same happens with Shun, a love interest of both Saki and Satoru, who becomes a karmic demon. They replace him and change the memories to be of Ryo, a completely different boy. The adults, however, are all aware of these things. Saki's parents had other kids before her, proven as she finds some of her sister's school items hidden away. They were removed, but her parents remember having had them, and it clearly gives them the worry of losing another child. Why would the adults remember? Well, that's because to justify all of this, the age that a cluster of cells becomes considered human was increased. Once set at 22 weeks, the Ethics Council, the shady rulers of this society, changed it to 17 years after birth. To justify these inhumane actions against humans, they did what they always do and changed the definition. No one under 17 is considered to even be human to them. Technically, you could add some reason to this, although they never directly attempt to give it even an idea of justice. An average human isn't fully mentally developed until the age of 25, so you could say that there's some level of development that needs to be reached before someone's considered human. Then there's a bit of a backing for it, however demonic and disgusting it may be. But that's obviously not the point of this. There isn't supposed to be a backing. It's like how they can kill around the death of shame. You start to kill around your definition of human. If you stop considering people, even those with power, those who were the exact same you would have been 10 years ago, then what's the issue if your concern is only with humans, which you have said they aren't? And they even flaunt the death of shame, their own ethics with this decision. They can't kill another human directly, so they use their power to turn house cats into the impure cats, vicious beasts that are absolutely loyal to their owners, pets they can tell to kill with impunity at the drop of a hat. Everything we've covered so far has been an example of the worst of maintaining humanity, but this one is just the most hypocritical. The impure cats are a workaround for their own genetically implanted ethics as they try to cover for their own past mistakes. The methods they implemented left them at a clear deficit, and unable to fix their mistakes, they just continued down the same path.
あらかじめ排除するという考え方がその後の主流となったのです。人間の社会もまたボノボ型の愛の社会へと作り変えることが急務です。
私を殺さないでください。
From all of this results a society which doesn't war, one which is open and loving to those who are remaining within it, one which is firmly at the top of their world, mostly free from outside danger, and which controls the danger within itself. There are, for all of its costs, benefits to it. They didn't make the world go to war thousands of years ago, but they did deal with the aftermath and try to ensure it would never happen again. Their power can be destructive and uncontrollable. In many ways, power is able to make the most humane into inhuman monsters. The karmic demons show it best as people who never harbored ill will, but whose very biology forced them to be destructive anyway. People who are willing to end their own lives rather than kill. This society was dealt a shit hand, and they did what they could to keep it together. But even with all of this in mind, is this a society we can call humane? The treatment of the monster rats is so inbuilt, even the reasonable adult Satoru calls their arrangement fair. They made the forcibly mutated humans call those with power God, and it went to their heads. They believe themselves to be that far above anything else that exists. They'll tear down entire highways worth of forest to secure their own passage through it, killing without a second thought, both when they can't see it like that and even when they directly do. Normally they kill by torturous and unimaginably painful methods, exploding the heads of their foes or stretching their bodies until they burst. I think this hero shot makes the best summary of it. There they sit thinking to burn down a field and explode the heads of every living creature within it. This is what the heroes do. And compared to everyone else, that's even reasonable. When Squealer is captured after his failed rebellion and tried at court, his punishment is to live in eternal hell. He's subject to the greatest capacity of pain the brain can handle, as his physicality is continually repaired by power, so the death isn't an escape. As he's sentenced to this fate, everyone but Saki and Satoru begins to cheer viciously. And if their treatment of others isn't enough, look at the treatment of their own. They kill children, looking at their own flesh and blood with fear of one thing they might be, rather than hope for everything that they could be. They send monstrous beasts after them for breaking hyper-specific rules which no one could know all of. And once you're gone, you're forcibly forgotten. As Shun describes it to Saki, someone erased the name on my grave. It's the same for everyone. Murder is overseen by an ethics committee, but it's fine because anyone under 17 isn't a person. and we see how they treat non-human things. When Saki first enters the unified class, it reminds her of a farm she visited as a child, and doesn't that really say it all? This society is one which effectively maintains its narrow definition of humanity, but not through advancement, rather stagnating and treating its children as mere cattle. The means to grow up and have more kids, so they can maintain humanity in the most technical way. The barriers they live behind are constantly shrinking, a perfect mirror for their own mindset and the narrowing of their own rules. Eventually, if they continue down this path, human will be a term that only applies to one single person under conditions like this. The monster rats are the counterpoint to humans. As they advance both technologically and societally, they attempt to make themselves look like the better side. But this isn't cut and dry black versus white, as the monster rats, former humans, repeat the same mistakes of the old world. They're constantly warring among each other, with commanders like Squealer who are willing to throw their brothers away in service of a cause with no second thought. They ask the gods to slaughter those who live under a different banner in bloody revenge. They fill the homes of their enemies with poisonous gas, hoping to kill each and every not just soldier, but citizen as well. They form a functioning democracy, but only because they lobotomize their queens, forcing their own mothers to live as brain-dead birthing factories and nothing more. And the physical advancements they make are built off of their own slave labor. After a conquest, the monster rats take the young of the clans they defeat, using them to bolster their own workforce, as they say, and rejoicing at the fact. But the end goal of all of this, fighting a harsh battle for a cause, is still very human. They fought to kill humanity because humanity itself treated them as simple bugs to be stomped on. To live the kinds of lives they saw intelligent beings like themselves as worthy of, they fought. Those who died would become the basis for the betterment of those who came after. These are the things that don't happen or don't have to happen in the human society, at least not to their own kind. The New World's methods, when compared against what humans used to be considered, have worked. Is it worth it? Do we accept a narrow definition of humanity, one which devalues so many of us in premise but permits a healthy life in harsh conditions? Or do we take the flaws of a broad definition like the monster rats? But the monster rats' goals are in service of something very human. We may war and hurt each other, but we advance, we grow rather than regress, at least physically, and we hold an inherent value across our lives. Is there even a right answer to all of this? As usual, if there is, I don't have the answer. So why have we talked about all of this? Why is it important? Why is this a video I called out as something I hope everyone watches, even if you haven't seen the anime? Well, in being transparent as I always want to do, because I want people to see my content, I want to succeed and be able to keep doing this. But also because this is an important topic. Human itself is a meaningless term, something we created to label what we are. Like all other labels we decided on, it holds no actual meaning, but we give it one. Justification. Human becomes a word that makes or breaks world-changing decisions. We have worldwide agencies who determine human rights and act on those markers. Sanctions and tariffs are put on nations for breaking these rules for humanity, which in turn change the lives of the citizens in those nations. Sometimes the offenses are so bad we have to decide if war, sending our own brothers, sisters, and children to war, is the option which respects the term human the most. The world once adorned itself with the enslavement of others, which some attempted to justify by saying that one side was less human than the other. They were there to serve. Modern-day genocides still occur with people claiming this reason. On a personal level, we allow entire lives to be modified by the definition of when cells become human. Will a woman live her own life, or will she live for two? She's a human, that's not where the decision lies. It lies in those cells, and that's where the debate is so often framed. Because we make our decision based on what human means. We don't have worldwide rights conventions for animals, at least not as much, and we don't worry if, say, one wolf isn't treating others with respect. And if two packs of animals fought, we would just laugh it off as nature working its course. But when does it stop being that? Do we have a plan for if there arose a new animal as intelligent as humans? In From the New World, the humans are caught massively off guard by the monster rats. They never assumed they would be smart or advanced enough to pull off this kind of revolution. The signs were all there, but they ignored them in arrogance. Again, they sat and watched the battles. They knew how far they were advancing. They had been in their colonies, and they did nothing about it. Because only humans are smart enough for that, and those rats aren't human, right? Until they kind of were. Does that now make them human? In fact, considering them human in the first place would have prevented all of this. Is that something we'll ever have to consider? We came about in a similar way. Evolution and advancement, a drive for a better future. An alien species observing us would have watched us past the point where we began to distinguish Neanderthal and Homo sapien and call one of them human. But to them, something more advanced, would there even be a real difference? Would we meet their version of human? Or are we still just animals squabbling in the dirt, simple things to be observed, like how the characters of the anime treat the monster rats?
それとも100万に1つの割合で生まれてくる悪魔なのかを額に油汗を浮かべながら
僕には顔がないのでも僕の顔なら君はよく知ってるはずだ
この頃私は規則より大事なものがあると思うように
The definition of what makes a human is important because of this justification. I love ethics because it's a process of making something that sounds amazing and smart in your own head, only to have it be destroyed by a single example that you didn't consider. I generally go with a Makishima-like definition of human value, that higher thought, intelligence, and some level of free will is what makes a human. He even uses this to justify his own actions, including murder, and it's likely a part of why his hue remains clear. It seems like a good definition, but there is that gray area. What about someone who physically can't enforce their own will with their body? Or someone who has their functions but for one reason or another has their mental capacity hampered, to where someone else makes their decisions? With a definition like the one we just said, someone could reason that these are people who fail to meet the definition of human, and from there they could justify awful actions against them, as so often has happened in the course of human history. When I think about that, I have to reconsider that definition I gave. I don't want to live by something that devalues people for something they didn't have a choice in. And that is why human history is something so apt to bring up. In From the New World, the history they learn excludes our current time. They learn propagandized stories of people who killed themselves for the greater good, reinforcing the suggestion that defines the early lives of these children. This is one of the things that helps them maintain an inhumane human society. They decided that true knowledge was a danger and discarded it. They could never learn from their former mistakes. And this is one of the big things that sets us apart from them. My education thankfully covered the most horrid aspects of human society and the past mistakes that put shame to the very term human. The things that make you wonder when we stop considering monstrous individuals to fall under the label of human themselves. Because I learned about those places and times, I'm aware that my definition of human can be dangerous. I've seen definitions of human be dangerous before. I have evidence from the past to build on that's true to events that occurred. Without this, I could live my entire life with an idea of human that unknowingly justifies murder and may even lead me to make that mistake someday. Similarly to history and something else they seem to not have in From the New World, we have a free system of media which is just as important to provoke this thought. Like Psychopaths or From the New World, humans use ourselves as inspiration to make a sort of pseudo-history in narrative. We tell stories about what human means, which is a crucial tool in provoking the kind of thought that can change people's minds and lead to a clearer and more humane mindset. I had these ideas in my head somewhere, but From the New World presented a case and evidence to base them around in a way that accentuated the most important elements. All I'm doing here is putting extra words and time into those. And stories do all of this while being entertaining and pulling us in, where sometimes we might not even recognize it's tricking us into learning and pondering ourselves. These aspects, the thing lacking in their society, free media and history, are a large part of why they regress. They have nothing to work on, no evidence that their current mindset isn't perfect, so they never even question it. Even the reasonable ones like Satoru. And it leads to their near destruction, saved only by the will of a few individuals, those who know their real history. We have those tools, and if we don't use them, there's no telling we won't end up like the Society of Power Users. And at a time when, at least in the US, certain despicable individuals are trying to turn away from our own history and teach children a version without these crucial details, this lesson is more poignant than ever. History without the negatives isn't history, it's just propaganda. Humans have warred, enslaved, murdered, and many, many other unspeakable things. We have to learn from those lessons. If we don't, we will never know what a human truly is, and we'll never reach the pinnacle of what our own potential is. We'll just stay stagnant and flawed. So learn and never stop. Keep questioning what you and what we all are until it seems right. It likely never will, and that's a good thing, because it means that we're still moving forward and humans are still evolving to something greater. But that's probably just about the best note I could end this video on, so I'll have some important links in the pinned comment: Twitter, Discord, Twitch, but most importantly, my Patreon, where you can support me directly like these amazing people above me right now. And once we get just a few more people over there, we'll start adding some extra benefits that I'll probably have you guys vote on. But I'll leave the ramble short and just say thank you for watching, and I hope I'll see you again soon.